Is there a doctor here? The panicked voice of the flight attendant echoed through the plane on my way home. Looking back, I saw an elderly woman collapsed in her seat. But I hesitated to raise my hand. I was once praised as having a gifted hands, but now my name is infamous. Maybe someone like me, exiled from the medical community, doesn't deserve to help. Just then, a middle-aged man declared, "I'm a doctor," and approached her. Relieved, I watched, but his incorrect treatment made me panic. I reluctantly said, "Well, I'm a doctor, too," and stepped in. "When I grow up, I want to marry a doctor." My childhood friend said this when we were in elementary school. Why a doctor? My mom says if we marry a doctor, we'll be set for life. Back then, I didn't know what set for life meant, but I thought that if I became a doctor, I'd marry her. I decided to become a doctor. And at that moment, I confessed my feelings to her. So, I started studying hard to get into medical school. But suddenly I, who didn't have particularly good grades, declared that I wanted to become a doctor. People around me were astounded and said, "Don't joke around." Even my parents, instead of being supportive or happy, patiently tried to dissuade me. They talked about how difficult it was to become a doctor and that it was an arduous path, even with extraordinary effort and intellect. But I ignored them and continued studying with all my might. Of course, the days were sometimes tough, full of study. But I didn't dislike learning, and the motivation to marry my first love was strong. Failure wasn't an option for me. In the end, my efforts paid off, and I got into one of America's top medical schools right after my high school. This shocked my parents and relatives. "Well, I always knew you could do it." Some uncles would say that, but I don't really care. Celebrated by those around me, I took this opportunity to move to New York and started living alone. Looking back after becoming a doctor, my reason for pursuing it was simple, but the profession suited me. As soon as I began working as a resident, I demonstrated my talent. Appropriate treatment, surgical skills, and calm judgment were my strengths. I became respected not only by my peers but also by professors and other doctors. After my residency, I found particular fulfillment in treating critical patients in surgery and chose to specialize in that field. "Tom, Mr. Johnson is calling for you." Sandra, a nurse, peeked her head through the exam room door. Her words snapped me awake. I must have dozed off during a quick break. "Director, Mr. Johnson was calling at a time like this." Tom, what kind of dream were you having?" Familiar Sandra teased me, implying she knew I'd been napping. Busted. It was a childhood dream. I wanted to be a doctor to impress my first crush. "Oh really? How sweet of you, Tom." "So, what happened to her?" "She's already married to another guy." The childhood friend who inspired me to become a doctor ultimately married someone else, and I never even got to date her. I had planned to propose after becoming a doctor, but a few years after graduating from college, I got an invitation to her wedding. So, without even confessing my feeling, I was left heartbroken. Unfortunately, even with my skills, I couldn't heal my broken heart. "Oh, Tom. I'm sure you could marry any woman you wanted now." "Don't worry, I'm already married to my work." I quipped as I left the exam room and headed to the director's office. I could manage heartbreak. Also, I was already captivated by the interest of medicine at the time. I found fulfillment in saving lives and being appreciated. I intended to dedicate my life to this work. Over the years, my skills improved further, and within a few years, I surpassed the senior doctors who were a decade older. And now, at 37. My name is widely known, and I'm hailed as a brilliant neurosurgeon. I've gained such fame that I've been given the slightly embarrassing nickname "Gifted Hands" on online hospital review sites. In recent years, reviews and word of mouth have brought patients flocking from all over the country. The patient I saw earlier had just undergone major surgery last week, and the recovery was going well. "If you hadn't operated on me, I don't know what would have happened. You are truly a genius, as the rumors say. A gifted hands." He cried while saying this, which made me happy to see him recover, but comforting him was quite a task. Because of that, I felt a little tired today, but I couldn't ignore a call from Mr. Johnson, whom I greatly respected. He is a fair and upright person, and I hold him in the highest regard. Despite my relative youth as a doctor, he acknowledged my abilities and promoted me. He even promised me the position of the next director. Walking down the corridor, I passed a nurse. Ah, Emily. Emily, a young nurse, flinched. This is good timing. About the patient in room 101 in their IV. As I gave her instructions, I noticed something was off. She avoided eye contact, and unusual, dull golden earrings dangled from her ears. After listening to my instructions, she left hastily without meeting my gaze once. Does she dislike me? I muttered to myself in response to her curt attitude. As a rising star, I wasn't well liked by some senior doctors I'd surpassed in rank. In particular, Mr. Johnson's son, Nick, and his associates resented me deeply. Despite relying on his position as the director's son without honing his skills, the fact that I was chosen as the next director over him seemed to have stirred jealousy. Even so, I thought I'd built good relationships with most of the nurses, even if a few doctors disliked me. I only had work-related conversations with Emily, so I couldn't recall doing anything to earn her disdain. Still thinking about her, I made my way to the director's office. As soon as I entered, I sensed the strange atmosphere. In the spacious room were Mr. Johnson in his chair and his son Nick standing beside him, arms crossed. The moment I walked in, Nick's accusing gaze pierced through me. "Excuse me." A faint voice came from behind. Turning around, I saw that it was Emily, who I'd just met. She looked as pale as a prisoner being led to the gallows. "Is something wrong?" I looked at her before asking Mr. Johnson directly. Mr. Johnson wore a somber expression and was about to say something when Nick raised his voice. "Something wrong? You feign ignorance. The evidence is right here." "What? Me? What for?" I was completely clueless. "Look at this." Nick grabbed a stack of papers from Mr. Johnson's desk and threw it at me. There was no way I could catch it all at once, and the documents scattered across the floor. "Nick!" Mr. Johnson reprimanded Nick, but his voice lacked its usual force. Resigned, I knelt down and picked up one of the scattered documents. I noticed scattered x-rays and what looked like prescription forms on the floor. The document I picked up was a medical record, essentially a printed electronic chart. The patient's name, Kevin White, sounded familiar. I recalled it from an internal meeting. This patient had died before undergoing surgery. It was supposed to be a simple case, but he met an untimely death. I remember thinking that if I'd been the surgeon, I could have saved him. But my eyes were drawn to the attending physicians section on the chart. My name was there. "Today, we received a complaint from that patient's granddaughter, from his family," Nick said haughtily. "You tampered with the medication. You disposed of the real drugs and prescribed a placebo to hasten his death. A placebo is a fake drug that has no effect." Finally, I understood the situation. I'm being accused of hastening this patient's death. Do you really think I'd do such a thing? I wasn't even in charge of that patient. Don't lie. Nick pointed triumphantly at the documents on the floor. The charts and prescriptions were entered through your account. And we have witnesses. Witnesses to a crime that never happened? Before I could retort, Emily stepped forward, visibly trembling. "Emily." She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I saw it. It was on March 10th. Tom made a deal with the patient's family to hasten his death in exchange for a large sum of money. I opened my eyes wide in shock at her unexpected words. "Emily, why are you lying? I would never do something like that. As a doctor, I save lives, not take them. Besides, I was at a conference on March 10th. Enough." Nick forcefully cut me off. She closed her eyes and repeatedly shook her head. "Even if the patient's family asked you, it's still a fact that you hastened his death," he declared. "No. It wasn't me." "Enough." Mr. Johnson feebly intervened, stopping us. "Of course, I want to believe you. But there's just too much evidence now. I can't protect you anymore. Mr. Johnson, please believe me. This is some kind of mistake. I've dedicated everything to this hospital. I recognize your contributions. That's why I appointed you as my successor. But we've collected statements from the patient's family who requested you. You were the attending physician, and they claim they gave you money. That's impossible." Nick sneered at me. Mr. Johnson hung his head low, and Emily trembled without meeting anyone's gaze. It felt as if the ground beneath my feet was collapsing. I was innocent. I knew that better than anyone. But here, everyone was set on incriminating me, and not even Mr. Johnson believed a word I said. I can't remember much of what happened after that, probably because of the shock. The patient's family chose not to go to the police, and Mr. Johnson said my past achievements meant he would handle the matter quietly. But word gets around. The scandal of a once renowned surgeon spread quickly to colleagues and patients alike. No matter how skilled I was, no hospital would hire me now. I was effectively exiled from the medical community. The same review sites that once praised me were now filled with slander. I only glanced at them once before stopping, but my scandal was splashed all over online forums and social media, written in unbearable words. A few days after I resigned from the hospital, it was Sandra who quietly revealed the truth to me. During a gathering, Nick had bragged about how he had forced me out. Yes, it was all the work of Mr. Johnson's son, Nick. Perhaps greed played a role, but above all, he couldn't forgive me for being chosen as the next director over him. On March 10th, when I was away attending a conference, Nick used my name tag and impersonated me to handle the patient. He received a large sum of money from the patient's family and tampered with the medication to hasten the patient's death. Emily, who prepared the medication, likely noticed the tampering. But he took advantage of her large debts, bribing and threatening her with dismissal if she didn't cooperate. It was all part of his scheme. Even after learning this, I didn't feel like proclaiming my innocence or fighting to clear my name. I was just too tired. The medical world, which I had believed was filled with purpose and dedicated to saving lives, had ruthlessly expelled me. Despite my lifelong contributions, over a trivial conspiracy. Even those I trusted abandoned me. I no longer had the energy left to fight. With no spouse or children, my work was my only support, and for a while, I withdrew into my dimly lit apartment. During that time, my parents back home heard the rumors about me. They repeatedly called me. It was difficult to speak to them, but I finally answered, and my worried mother kept urging me, "Come home for a while." She was so persistent that I felt she'd board a flight to New York if I ignored her. Eventually, I relented and reluctantly decided to go home. Since entering medical school, I had devoted myself entirely to studying and working, so it had been years since I last returned home. To be honest, going back was tough and painful. Ever since I gained fame as a gifted surgeon, my name had unnecessarily spread in my hometown. Naturally, this scandal must have spread as well. I didn't feel like returning of my own accord. What should I do with my life now? Even though I still had my medical license, I was no longer effectively a doctor. I couldn't even imagine myself doing anything other than being a doctor. With gloomy thoughts, I gazed down at the clouds passing below from the airplane window. Ah! Grandma, please stay with us. Suddenly, a girl's shriek pierced the air from behind me. The cry was so distressing that I sat up from my seat and instinctively turned around. What happened? A young flight attendant nearby rushed over. Behind me was a girl with an elderly woman, who appeared to be limp and slumped in her seat. It was clear she wasn't simply asleep. Is there a doctor here? The flight attendant's pale face filled with fear as she wandered through the seats, calling out. She was probably new to the job. Though she looked attractive, her expression was on the verge of tears, visibly panicking. Should I step up? But I'm not a doctor anymore. Yes, I'm a doctor. Suddenly, a middle-aged man seated across from me raised his hand and stood up. By chance, another doctor happened to be on board. Relieved, I sat back in my chair. I've always wanted to do this, he said, incongruously cheerful as he walked excitedly toward the seat behind me. Now I wouldn't need to intervene. Though reassured, I couldn't help but glance back, just in case. My grandma suddenly started struggling. The girl explained nervously. He inspected the patient with a calm demeanor. Looks like she choked on her in-flight meal. We can handle this with some force, he said as he lifted the elderly woman from behind and repeatedly slapped her back. The girl watched anxiously, but the woman remained unresponsive. That's odd. How about this? He muttered, beginning to show signs of panic. He wrapped his arms around the elderly woman from behind and placed his fist near her diaphragm. It was the Heimlich maneuver, but his positioning was off. If he continued like this, I couldn't hold back. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood up. No! You'll break her ribs! I shouted. My sudden outburst made the doctor, the girl, and the flight attendant freeze. I rushed over to her to check on her condition. She had a pulse but seemed unconscious. The Heimlich maneuver wouldn't work here. I glanced at the flight attendant, who seemed on the verge of panic. Clutching the elderly woman's hand, she looked at me with a tearful expression. I'm also a doctor. Could you lend me a pen and some antiseptic? I asked her slowly and calmly, trying to ease her anxiety. I caught a glimpse of her name tag under her scarf. It read Maggie. Yes. She immediately stood up and returned with a pen and a spray bottle of antiseptic. I took apart the pen, removed the ink refill, and carefully bent it to create a sharp, clear tube. I thoroughly disinfected the sharpened end with antiseptic. What are you going to do with that? She asked, bewildered. I suspect she has pneumothorax. She can't breathe on her own. Pneumothorax is when air leaks from the lungs. We'd need an X-ray to confirm it, but making her vomit wouldn't help. So, this will manually secure her airway. I doubt anyone around fully understood my explanation. I gripped the tube tightly and carefully located the airway position. Then, with all my strength, I swung my arm down and plunged the tube into her chest. There was a tense silence as everyone held their breath. I was confident I'd inserted it correctly, but even for me, this was the first time using such makeshift tools. As long as she can breathe now, she should be fine, I assured. As the commotion continued, I intended to leave it to the middle-aged doctor and return to my seat. But then, why, you're the one from that time, the girl shouted. You're trying to let Grandma die too, just like Grandpa. Her words made me realize who she was, and I froze. I tried to avert my gaze, but she yelled, "You can't deny it anymore," and grabbed my arm with all her strength. Eyes filled with hatred and a determination not to let me escape glared at me. No doubt about it. She must be the granddaughter of the patient who died in that hospital incident. Although we had never met directly, the incident had caused quite a stir. It wouldn't be surprising if she recognized my face from the internet. To her, I am not even a doctor. I am the hated enemy who let her grandfather die. Yet, the tense silence was broken by a faint sound of breathing, a soft whoosh. Ah, we're out of the woods now, the middle-aged doctor said with relief. In front of him, her chest rose and fell gently as she began to breathe again. Thank you, young man. You've got real skill, like a miracle worker. He seemed to realize he'd misdiagnosed the situation and sheepishly thanked me. The girl still looked unconvinced, but she reluctantly let go of my arm and checked on her grandmother. This is just first aid. She needs to be taken to a hospital immediately, I said. As soon as Maggie heard this, she dashed off. Moments later, an announcement rang out through the cabin. Due to a medical emergency on board, this flight will be making an emergency landing at the nearest airport. She must have promptly spoken to the captain and arranged the landing. Despite her inexperience, she acted swiftly. Although her constant hand-holding showed she was a bit uncertain as a flight attendant, she seemed kind-hearted. Maggie returned after the announcement. Thank you so much. Because of you, her life was saved. Now more composed, she smiled and thanked me warmly. I only did what I could, I replied. We'll land at the airport soon and transfer the passenger to a hospital. Yes, we should hurry. Because her condition isn't stable yet, could I trouble you to accompany her to the hospital? What? I glanced over at the girl. She frowned but didn't voice any objections. Yes. Now that I'd begun treatment, I felt responsible. Though hesitant, I agreed to go to the hospital. The plane made its emergency landing, dropping off just the girl, her grandmother, and me before resuming its original flight path. We headed directly to the hospital in an ambulance that Maggie had arranged. In the ambulance, the girl remained silent, occasionally glancing at me but saying nothing. Once at the hospital, I explained the situation to the doctors. The elderly woman underwent an emergency surgery. The operation was successful. I watched from a distance as the girl clung to her conscious grandmother, sobbing with relief. Seeing her cry and talk to her grandmother was a stark contrast to how fiercely she'd confronted me on the plane. Now, she seemed like any ordinary girl. Having lost her grandfather under suspicious circumstances, her stubborn attitude was understandable. I'm glad I could help. I thought so to myself. After ensuring she was stable, I quietly left the hospital and headed back to the airport. But there, to my surprise, was Maggie waiting for me. She had changed out of her flight attendant uniform into a casual dress. With her hair down, she looked much softer. "Thank you so much for everything," she said politely, and I found myself flustered by her gratitude. "My name is Maggie. I can't thank you enough for saving that passenger." "I really just did what anyone would do," I replied. She told me she'd booked the next flight for me, so I accepted gratefully. In her private clothes, she was cheerful and talkative. She openly praised my quick actions as amazing and admirable, making me feel good. When I commended her for arranging the emergency landing, she blushed deeply. As we chatted while waiting for the flight, we quickly became friends. "Let's have a meal sometime," I said as we exchanged contact information before parting ways. Although my return trip was a bit delayed, I safely made it home, thanks to the flight she booked. After leaving New York with a gloomy heart, I now felt surprisingly refreshed. I got off the plane at the local airport and went straight to my parents' home. My mother, who had been worried, seemed reassured by my unexpectedly bright demeanor. "You sounded like you were on your last legs over the phone, but you look healthier than I expected," she said with a laugh. After catching up with my parents, I enjoyed a calm, unhurried time with them. Here's what I learned later. A few days after I left the hospital, Nora White, the elderly woman I had helped, was able to sit up. Her attending doctor had told her, "You're lucky there was a talented doctor on that flight." "Is that so? Then, I should properly thank him," Nora said, asking her granddaughter Lynn about me. Naturally, Lynn couldn't answer where I was. "I don't know where he went. But, he's the one who let Grandpa die," she spat. "Would such a man desperately try to save me?" Nora asked, and Lynn fell silent. After directly encountering me, Lynn also began to harbor doubts. "Besides, he's a brilliant doctor who managed to handle that emergency." "I don't know, but Grandpa didn't die of natural causes, right? Something's definitely off." Lynn couldn't easily accept me, the person she'd long resented as her grandfather's enemy. It seems like there's more to this story. Being the wife of a wealthy magnate, Nora was both clever and shrewd. While I was enjoying a brief period of peace at home, it seems that Nora was discharged from the hospital and immediately began searching for my whereabouts. She contacted the airline and verified the situation again with Maggie, and using the financial power of the White family, she managed to locate me, who was well known through the media. I decided to stay with my parents for a while, tired after losing my job. But after spending years working day and night, I felt restless when not working, even at home. So I asked my parents if I could help with the small and they ran. Compared to being a doctor, it was easier because I could sleep at night. Plus, physical work and chatting with guests served as a refreshing change of pace. A few days after I began helping out. "Hello, is anyone here?" A refined woman's voice came from the entrance. "We didn't have any reservations today, so it must have been a walk-in guest." "Hi, how are you doing?" I opened the door and stood speechless. There stood Nora with a smile, Lynn with a stern face, and Maggie looking troubled. "We finally found you. Could you come with us for a bit?" Nora spoke gently but with an undeniable forcefulness. There was no room to refuse. I was ushered into the luxury car parked at the entrance, and we were soon on the road. "How did you know I was here?" Unable to contain myself in the car, I asked. Nora smiled elegantly. "You're quite well known. Besides, you seem close to her," she said, glancing at Maggie beside me. "Don't blame her for acting on her own. I learned about your situation from her because she was involved at that time." I couldn't help but glance at Maggie, wondering what she had shared. Like a puppy scolded for mischief, she ducked her head. "I'm sorry." She insisted on thanking you, and I couldn't refuse. But I only told her the truth. I let out a small sigh of relief. At least, it seemed like there were no unfounded lies being spread about me this time. As we spoke, the car parked in the lot of a high-end restaurant renowned in the area. The manager and chef even came out to greet us. Although far from New York, the White family seemed to be highly regarded here as well. Naturally, we were shown to a private room. Once inside, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar atmosphere, I was stunned to see guests already waiting. Mr. Johnson. Anne. Mr. Johnson from the hospital where I used to work was there. His son Nick and the nurse Emily were also present. These were the three people who had abandoned and betrayed me. Before I could feel the anger I had tried to forget, the three of them began to apologize profusely. "We're so sorry." What? What was going on? As I stood bewildered, Nora began explaining from the side. I know it's presumptuous, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing. According to her explanation, Nora's husband Kevin had been a prominent local landowner and one of the wealthiest people in the region. However, when he was hospitalized with a terminal diagnosis, the relatives who heard about his limited time began squabbling over inheritance. There, a son and his wife, eager to receive their inheritance quickly, approached a young doctor with a timid demeanor, proposing, "Is there a way to hasten the death? We will pay you handsomely for it." At a loss, the young doctor consulted Nick, his senior and Mr. Johnson's son. Nick saw this as an opportunity to bring me down. Seeing an opportunity to bring me down, he told the young doctor, "I'll take it from here," and took over the patient's care. He then used my name tag while I was away to impersonate me, pocketing the money and pinning the entire crime on me. He even accessed my computer to log into the hospital system, fabricating medical charts and prescriptions to make it appear as though I had been Kevin's attending physician. Emily happened to witness the scene by chance. I knew the truth. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she haltingly explained herself. Her attire was modest, and she no longer wore those expensive-looking earrings. I was a compulsive spender and loved branded accessories. It got out of control, and I accumulated a huge amount of debt on my credit card. I tried to pay it off by working night shifts, but it was a vicious cycle of buying more things. I was exhausted and overwhelmed. Desperate to escape my debt, so I took hush money from Nick. Just as I wondered if it was merely an excuse, she raised her tear-streaked face and exclaimed, "But," as she looked at me. "But." When I heard that you had been forced to quit, I felt so guilty. I did something terrible. I know this won't heal the wounds you suffered, but I'll accept punishment. Please, bring Tom back," she said, apologizing to me before pleading with Mr. Johnson. "I'm also sorry," Mr. Johnson began. "You were telling the truth, but I was swayed by fabricated evidence and didn't believe you." He apologized to me as well. "This may be bold of me to ask, but if you'd like, would you return to our hospital? We need your skills." I didn't know what to say. No amount of apologies could erase my tarnished reputation. As I stood silently, Nora quietly interjected, "Your innocence has already been proven. Just stand tall. We'll make a public announcement through the media, and if anyone tries to harm you, we will crush them." I had already witnessed Nora's resourcefulness, wealth, and influence firsthand. Though crush sounded a bit drastic, it was convincing. "But still, why would you go to such lengths for me?" I asked, unable to fully believe it. After all, we weren't close. Why would Nora do this for me? I'd lost faith in people. She gave a gentle, encouraging smile. "Because I'm alive today thanks to you. It would be wrong not to return the favor." I was nearly brought to tears. "Thank you. But please give me a little time to think." I couldn't answer right away. The situation was too overwhelming for me to fully grasp right away. I left the restaurant and returned home in the luxury car. After sharing everything that had happened with my parents and telling them I was leaning toward accepting her offer, they encouraged me with smiles. "You loved being a doctor so much. If that's what you want to do, you should go back to it. That's right. You didn't do anything wrong, so follow your passion." Even with their support, I hadn't fully made up my mind. Nora frequently reached out to me, but I kept postponing my response, coming up with various excuses. One day, I saw my name on a big headline on an online news site as "The Tragic Falsely Accused Genius Surgeon." The article detailed Nick's crimes and the hospital's response. Through that news, I learned that Nora's son and daughter-in-law, Nick, and Emily had been arrested. Now my name wasn't just known for genius neurosurgeon and gifted hands but also hero who saved lives bravely amidst tragedy. The news quickly spread across the internet, not only clearing my name but also making me even more well-known. After the media inquiries had died down, Maggie visited the inn on her own. My flight was nearby, so I stopped by. She said, blushing slightly as she smiled and booked a room. She stayed for several days. However, as the days passed, she showed no signs of leaving, and I grew increasingly concerned. Is everything okay with work? I asked her this a few days after she began her stay. It was while I was serving dinner prepared for her. I'm fine, she replied. No way. Flight attendants have busy schedules. Suspecting something, I pressed her, and she reluctantly confessed that she had come to convince me on Nora's behalf. You've been cleared of all wrongdoing. Why aren't you returning to medicine? When I remained silent, Maggie leaned forward and said, You're needed on the front lines of medicine. If you don't go back now, when will you? Where's that decisiveness you showed when you saved Nora? She was right. Helping Nora made me realize something. I wanted to be a doctor again. I wanted to save lives and help people rebuild their lives. That's what I'd lived for. But every time I thought that, a doubtful voice whispered deep inside me. Can I really regain the trust one once lost so easily? Enough of that, she said, frustrated. I expected her to storm out, but her words took me by surprise. I'm not leaving until you nod your head. What? She firmly settled into the inn. Apparently, she'd already spoken with my parents. I'm going to help out here, so please let me stay a little longer. She had asked them. She was young, smart, beautiful, cheerful, and acknowledged my abilities. My parents were completely won over and took a liking to her. My mother was already playing the mother-in-law role. I wish she'd marry into our family, she said, half jokingly, half seriously. Seeing the situation, I finally made up my mind. I'm going back to New York, I announced, and Maggie's face lit up. You're going back to being a doctor? Yes, but I won't return to my previous hospital. I'm planning to open my own clinic. That's wonderful. She smiled. As much as I hated to admit it, she looked truly beautiful when she smiled like that. Can I go back to New York with you? She asked, her eyes sparkling. All I could do was raise my hands in surrender. After returning to New York, as I told Maggie, I established a small clinic. My skills quickly gained a good reputation, and the clinic grew gradually. As the clinic expanded, I found myself short-handed, so I reached out to Emily, who had been released from prison, to work as a nurse. Despite having been coerced into framing me, she had shown the courage to testify, and I wouldn't have been here without her. I wanted to show my gratitude somehow. I still keep in touch with Nora occasionally. When she told me that Lynn was inspired by me and aimed to become a nurse, I felt a little embarrassed. It looks like we'll have a long relationship ahead, Dr. Scott, Nora said, applying pressure, which made me smile wryly. I still kept in contact with Maggie, too. Though our busy schedules and her globetrotting made meeting up after the incident rare. We'd occasionally update each other on our lives. Recently, however, she'd been visiting the clinic frequently with gifts from her flights. You've been coming often lately. Is something wrong? I asked as I accepted the gifts. Maggie mumbled quietly. Nora said if I don't hurry, someone might steal you away. What did you say? Nothing at all. I asked again since I hadn't heard clearly, but she, blushing furiously, vehemently denied it. The nurses took the opportunity to tease me relentlessly. To be honest, I hadn't been oblivious to her feelings. However, she was young, with a bright future ahead of her. Maybe a part of me still harbored some lingering distrust. I hesitated, unable to fully trust her. But then, Nora finally reached out. Dr. Scott, women have all sorts of time limits. Isn't it time to make things clear? I couldn't argue with her. It's rare for you to call me, Dr. Scott, Maggie said when I summoned her for the first time. The airport observation deck. I chose a location that seemed convenient for her. Between surgeries, I found some time to escape from the hospital, still dressed in my white coat. She arrived in a dress, looking as beautiful as she did the day we met at the airport. Looking back now, it was Maggie who helped me return to the light, as much as Nora had with her support. She encouraged me when I felt weak, sometimes scolding me, and always stood by me with unwavering patience. I owed it to her to respond. She gazed at the planes taking off. Watching her, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small, fabric-covered box I'd prepared. Inside was a ring. Maggie. I called her name for the first time. She turned around, startled. I opened the box and offered it to her. Will you? My words were drowned out by the sound of the departing plane. My luck seemed to falter even at this crucial moment. But she smiled. Yes, I'd love to.